Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of Postnatal Minds, the podcast. So this episode is going to be around postnatal depression, and today I'm joined by the lovely Amber, who reached out to me after watching the episode before last, I think it was, and is really bravely going to share some of her story on this topic. But Amber, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you. So I'm Amber. I have a little boy called Teddy who's 20 months old. I never know whether, because he's that in between 1 and 2, I'm like, do I say he's 1 or 2? Like, can I still count his age in months? I'm not sure. Anyway, he's 20 months old. We live in Bedfordshire, but we used to live down in Brighton. Well, I used to live down in Brighton pre-Teddy. Have also lived in London, but yeah, ended up in Bedfordshire. And I work in communication, so I'm a full-time working mum, which brings its own challenges as well.
Yeah, love to see it.
Yes, and yeah, that's basically our little team at the moment. And then, yeah, hopefully adding to it this year if we can. But yeah.
Oh. Well, yeah, the month thing's really funny, isn't it? I feel like I got to 2 and then just gave up. But yeah, a lot of people that don't have kids are like, why do people use months? It's so confusing. But I think we're just taught in that way, aren't we? With the months and the leaps and all of that. But yeah, I feel like once I got to 2, I stopped.
There's such a difference between a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old as well. So that's kind of why, like, in my mind, I have to stick by doing the months, because I'm like, but he's nowhere near, he's not a 1-year-old anymore in any way.
No. I actually also, you'll find if and when you have your second, you forget as well. Like Arlo's actually 19 months today. Like you just, like 1.5. I just forget. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Tell us about your journey and what made it different and what made you reach out to share that story.
Sure. So I had a pretty standard textbook pregnancy. It was all very smooth, just a bit sicky in the beginning. And Teddy was actually breech up until like 37 weeks. And then I had the procedure that I can't remember the name of it, but where they turn them round.
Did you?
Yeah, that was quite hardcore.
Was it?
Yeah, it was quite an experience. But in my mind, I was like, it's fine. This is getting me prepped for birth. Like,
really?
All these uncomfortable experiences.
Yeah, because a lot of people choose not to do that, don't they? And just go ahead with the breech. Because I have heard it can be quite painful. Where was the pain?
It was like, basically you could feel them like turning the baby round. So it was, my whole stomach felt like it had like immense pressure on it. Yeah. And obviously it's been such like a sensitive area for quite a long time. So to have someone like pushing down on it was quite unpleasant.
Unnatural.
Yeah, but I had it in my mind that I was like desperate to have a natural birth. So I was going to try everything to make.
And it's not always successful, is it?
No, procedure. So actually the chances of it being successful are less than unsuccessful. So usually it doesn't work. So they were very surprised when it did.
Oh, really? And did he literally just turn straight away? Like how? Yeah. That quickly?
Yeah, they were like sort of feeling round my belly a lot, and then they were like, right, this is the position, and then they just basically turned him, and they were like, wow, it's worked. And that wasn't even like too stressful, and I was like, okay, if you say so.
Goodness, that's amazing.
So then I was all like hyped that I was going to get my natural birth that I'd prepped for my whole pregnancy. I'd done hypnobirthing, I'd read like all the books.
Yeah, me too.
Basically did everything I could to have my birth go a certain way that I would have liked it to have gone, which it did not. So I ended up having a C-section after being in labour for 3 days, I think it was.
How far gone were you, Amber, at that point?
So I'd got to like 5 centimetres dilated, and I just was not progressing from there for a long time. Baby was back to back as well. So all my labour pains were in my back. And then it just got to a point.
Were you at your due date?
Yeah, so I was actually like almost 2 weeks overdue at this point as well.
Yeah, that horrible way.
Yeah, almost 42. I was one day off being 42 weeks.
Isn't that the longest wait you've ever experienced in your life? I, like you, wanted a natural birth. With my first, I was 42 plus 2. And nothing was happening still. So I actually did an elective C-section. But that 2 weeks and 2 days was the longest wait I've ever experienced in my life.
Yeah, and there's absolutely no way I would do it again. So if I am lucky to have another baby, I would basically put myself in for an elected C-section if I was at like 41 and would not go any more over, because it was just so uncomfortable that last few weeks, and it was the middle of June.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about just locking it in and knowing when that is finishing. So you're 42 weeks, you go into labour naturally, then what happens?
So it was all very calm and nice to begin with. We'd done so much prep for like the home birth experience that we had like the pool ready, we had all the little lights and affirmations and everything up around the house. So when I went into labour, it was actually just lovely. And I was at home and in the bath a lot. And then things started to ramp up a bit more. So I decided to retreat to my ensuite. I was basically like stuck in this tiny room and was like not going to leave for anyone or anything.
Really?
And then, when things started to really ramp up, my partner called our doula, and also we had the home birth midwives on call for us. So called them, and 2 of them came. It wasn't actually, I'd been seeing the same midwife throughout my pregnancy, but she wasn't actually on shift that day. So, but she comes into this later on in the birth story. So then everyone came, and basically, I wouldn't leave that ensuite. And everyone's like, but Amber, you've got this lovely pool downstairs that's all ready for you. And I was like, just leave me in here.
Yeah.
And then eventually I did make my way downstairs to the pool, and I spent a lot of my labour at home having the home birth experience that I'd planned for.
Yeah.
And it was all fine and lovely, really. Yeah. And then it just got to a point, the sun came up again. So this was 2 suns I'd seen come up, and I was just like, what's happening here? Why have I not given birth to this baby yet?
Yeah, what's not happening?
Like 3 days. So then they started to do some more checks and basically were like, this isn't progressing. So, and I'd kind of got to the end of my
energy levels.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I was just like, right, I need some more pain relief because gas and air isn't doing it for me anymore.
Yeah.
And I just need to something needs to
some relief.
happen. So I actually made the decision to go into hospital at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And they sent an ambulance, which was horrific.
God, a bit dramatic.
Yeah, it was a bit dramatic, but that's what they wanted to do to make sure I'd get there. And it was a really horrible experience, and actually had sent me backwards in terms of progress. So
because you're in active labour at that point, aren't you? That's probably why they wanted to do the ambulance, because in case things progress really quickly from that point, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So got to hospital, and different people were checking me and saying different things as well, like, you're this amount dilated now, or basically like saying I'd gone backwards. And I was just like, what is happening?
Ow, yeah.
So my midwife from the home birth team that I'd been seeing throughout my pregnancy she actually came in, and she gave me 2 choices. She was like, Amber, you can carry on with this, but we can't say how much longer it's going to be. It could be another 24 hours, it could be another 48 hours, and your baby's going to start getting more and more distressed.
Yeah.
Or you can be in theatre and have a cesarean within 4 hours. And I was like, choose option B, please. I have had enough.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. So how was the C-section in itself? Were you because a lot of people, once they get to that point, these C-sections are actually nice because it's all stopping in, well, an hour. It's all wrapped up in an hour once you're in there, really, isn't it?
Yeah. So as soon as I knew that was happening, I felt just so much calmer about everything. And yeah, C-section had never really, it was kind of like at the end of my birth plan, like if this happens, but it had no detail around it, like what I would want if I were to have a C-section. It basically just said, make sure I've got my music playing. Yeah. So yeah, I went into it just feeling like relief, basically, that I was going to not have to endure any more days of being in labour.
Yeah.
And yeah, the C-section experience was fine.
And did you know what you were having?
No, we didn't know.
Okay, so you had that surprise still.
Yeah, exactly. And I like actually being in theatre, and I had Leanne, my midwife. I had my partner there. Yeah. I knew that my doula was out in the corridor somewhere and had my music playing. And yeah, it was exactly how I would have wanted that experience to be.
Amazing. So I presume when he came out, he was all okay. What was he a healthy weight? And yeah, did you got that instant kind of relief?
Yeah. So he was a very healthy 9.2.
Wow.
Probably added towards the difficult experience I had trying to get him out. Yeah. But yeah, he was very, very healthy weight. And apart from like the initial them stitching me up and everything, I was able to like have skin to skin with him and try and initiate breastfeeding.
Oh, amazing. So he arrives and you have that after a long time of being in pain and exhausted, he's there and everything's okay. How long did you spend in hospital and how did that first postnatal bit look for you?
So I only stayed in hospital overnight. Obviously they send partners away, don't they, after like 9 p.m. So that was a bit scary, just being on my own there with a baby.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I was just like relieved at that point and just excited to get home. And in my mind, I was like really buzzing about getting home to my cheese board and a glass of wine.
Home comforts. Yeah. But one night, because that's quite soon really after a C-section, isn't it? Because if you haven't had a C-section before, the level of pain can be quite strong and different trusts give out different levels of pain relief. But presumably you were able to just get home and rest rather than be in hospital and rest. It's obviously nice with your home comforts, isn't it? But how was your recovery from that C-section?
It was okay. I think if anything, I tried to do too much too soon. I hadn't really like respected the fact that my body had been through major surgery because I hadn't done any research on C-sections beforehand. No. So I was just
I feel like even when people do research on it, like you still don't, because it's viewed as a way of birth, you still don't view it as like a major operation where you're slicing through so many layers of your body. So you've got the recovery from that in terms of the recovery of postnatally with all your hormone drop and everything. And then you've also got this huge operation to recover from. Don't really feel like we talk about that very much with the pain and what you can do to help and like scar healing. And, if you sneeze, or I remember the car journey on the way home, going over bumps and being like, what? And the second time round with Arlo, I had a pillow that I would push in when I had like ways to pull myself up on the bed because I knew it was coming. But I feel like there could be so much more prep pre and postnatally about C-section personally.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I knew nothing.
No.
I was not prepped. So, but yeah, I think because I'd stayed quite active throughout my pregnancy, I think that helped me in terms of recovery. It didn't feel too long that I was up and about again.
Yeah. So you get home day 2, I guess you are, or maybe day 3 at that point. And how was your feeding in the first few weeks?
So I think it was the second night we were home. Basically, Teddy just would not stop crying like the entire night. And I kind of knew that something wasn't right. I was like, I know babies cry a lot, but this is like another level.
Yeah.
And then we had the midwives come and visit on day 3, and they basically said that like I'm like feeding it's obviously not doing the trick because he's lost like over 10% of his birth weight. So they wanted to take him back into hospital, and it was actually my partner's birthday. So there we are, going back into hospital. And yeah, they basically said to me like, yeah, this kid needs a bottle of formula in him.
It's hungry.
And yeah, he's hungry, and that's why he hasn't been able to settle. And then I did get some help and advice around like breastfeeding and also pumping.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just kind of sent on my way to just deal with it on my own.
Again, something that we don't really talk about a lot. Like I would say pretty much in those first few days, 2-3 weeks, 80% of how a mum maybe feels is linked into how the feeding journey is going. And I know mums that, come out, the baby latches and they're absolute dream feeders. And then I know other mums that the baby has tongue tie, or they don't latch well, and their nipples are like bleeding and razor blades within a week. And yes, if you get the feeding input in early, it can be great, but sometimes feeding journeys just don't go well. And we also need to normalize the fact that not everyone will succeed in feeding, and it's okay if it doesn't, if that's your journey and it doesn't end like that. My 2 feeding journeys couldn't have been more different. And this is why I think it's not really talked about that much, because you have to wait and see, don't you? You can't be like, I'm going to do this. Just like the birth, you have to see how the latching goes, how your flow is, if there's any problems with the baby's mouth and tongue tie. There's so many anomalies that you have to wait for. And then you've got this huge hormone drop, and you've got the guilt. And that is such a huge part of that first initial week or 2.
Yeah, so actually, part of the feeding issues was because Teddy had a tongue tie. So yeah, when we went into hospital on day 3, they snipped it, and then with the hope that that would make the feeding experience better for both of us. But yeah, it didn't. It was still extremely painful. He was still hungry after every feed. I had, like, whenever I had a midwife or a health visitor come to see us, I was getting different advice from different people. And yeah, it just wasn't working for us, basically, in that initial period. So,
had you really wanted to breastfeed? Because I know with my first, I was like, whatever happens, and then when the reality came to it, because I could see milk coming out of my breast, I wanted to do it. I should. All those, that the guilt I felt when I look back now was not like of a normal amount. Were you the same?
Yeah, definitely. I kind of went into it like I would like to try and breastfeed. But yeah, as you say, when you're producing milk and you're just like, okay, yeah, I was putting so much pressure on myself to give this baby breast milk. And that's why it ended up in a year of me pumping instead, because nursing didn't work out for us. So I was like, I will do whatever it takes to make sure he gets breast milk. I know it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things, but like I was just so set on that, and it was to my own detriment hugely.
Yeah. I had similar experience with my first. I mean, it was lockdown, so it was even more warped of an experience. But I pumped every 3 hours for 6 months, lockdown, through the night. I look back now and I'm like, why didn't I give myself that sleep? And enjoy the fact that she would sleep throughout the whole night and I was up. Yeah. But like you said, it's that unspoken guilt. It was just, and you did it for a year. Yeah. And do you look back now and think there's no way I would do that again?
Absolutely. So with baby number 2, if breastfeeding is not working for us after 2 weeks, then I'd go straight to formula, and I'd have no shame or guilt or any feelings like that around doing so, because I know it'll be better for me in the long run, which means it'll be better for baby. Yeah, everything that I went through with our feeding challenges in the first 3 months actually affected the bonding experience between me and Teddy as well. So I wouldn't want that again.
No, happy mum, happy baby. And also they don't care where the milk comes from as long as they're fed. So you have your different and difficult feeding journey, you're pumping.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what happens next in that journey.
I was still trying desperately to breastfeed, even though I was putting a lot of energy into pumping for 3 months. I was, still trying to nurse him and getting nowhere. I remember a time when I think Teddy was around 2 months, and I went to go and visit some friends down in Sussex. And that's the first time I'd spent with like friends that I'd known for a long time. I'd seen like new mum friends during that time, but not friends that I'd known for a long time. And basically, by the end of that weekend, they sat me down and they were like, Amber, this isn't good for you, what you're doing here. Like, you're trying to do it all, and actually, like, it's having an effect on you. You're not happy, and we can see that. And actually, one of my friends that I was with that weekend works in perinatal mental health, and she said, I actually think you need to get some support because this is really taking its toll on your mental health, what you're trying to achieve here.
And when you look back, what do you now know that your friends saw that was concerning for them?
I was really upset a lot of that weekend. Like, obviously you get the baby blues, but this was 8 weeks later and I was still like crying a lot. They could see that I just wasn't really myself that weekend. They could see the frustration that I had when Teddy wasn't feeding, and I'd have to like go and get a bottle of formula for him or go and pump again or whatever. And they could see how that frustration was, they could see that I wasn't there. Obviously, I loved Teddy from day one, but because of the frustration, they could see that our bond wasn't quite there yet.
Yeah.
Because I was almost like mad at him for not like getting it. So I think that's also where they were like quite concerned. Like,
I mean, that totally makes sense though, doesn't it? Because you have life before baby comes, and then you are feeling this way because of the situation, not because of anything else. So it's very easy to associate that frustration with this baby, this child who's not doing what we thought we were going to do. And presumably you've still got broken sleep, so you were tired, and that never really helps emotions.
Again, trying to do too much too soon as well. I mean, what was I doing at 8 weeks postpartum going down to Sussex and trying to have a girls' weekend? Like,
it's very early
was
doors.
Good for me. It was good in the long run because I came out of that weekend like a lot clearer on what the hell was going on with me.
Yeah.
But actually, physically, that's a lot. And I wouldn't do that again second time round either. Like, so I would respect the postpartum period so much more.
Yeah. So your friends flagged to you that, we really don't think you're right, you need to get some help. And did you took that and you did something about it?
I did something about it straight away because I thought, if my best friends are saying this to me and they know me better than anyone, then I need to go and do something about this. And also if they can see that it's affecting the bond that I have with my baby, then I need to get this sorted.
Yeah. And
then I had the conversation with my partner when I came back from that weekend, and he was like, thank God. Like, thank God.
Oh, 'cause that was going to be my next question. Was he worried? And why do you think he maybe hadn't said anything to you at that point? Was he just kind of in it as well?
Yeah, he was definitely worried, but I don't think he'd said anything just yet because, well, he kind of expressed some concerns around the fact that I was still very upset, like, even though I was out of that initial giving birth and But I think because this is our first baby, like, he didn't know the level of like how emotional someone might be during that time.
And also your fragility, like, and your relationship. And he's, again, like the dads and the fathers are going through this new thing too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, once I'd gone back to him and said, look, my friends are worried about me. And he said, yeah, so am I. Then that made me even more, it made me want to seek some support even more.
And did you go to your GP first?
God, I had such an awful experience. I had my 8-week check, like, around that time. And I went to the GP and said, like, they checked baby and they were like, yep, he's fine. How about you? I was definitely a second thought in that situation. And I said,
I think the baby is seen first, aren't they, in that check?
Yeah, it was quite eye-opening actually. And I said to them, like, look, I'm not okay. Like, I'm still so emotional. I'm really struggling with feeding. I'm grieving the birth as well. Like how, I'm struggling here. And they said, you seem fine to us.
Wow.
Yeah. And I couldn't believe that they came back with that. And so I had to then go and research other ways of getting support.
So I never want my service or this podcast to be, because I think the NHS is honestly one of the wonders of the world, but to hear experiences like that, and I was the same when I went with Arlo. I was not okay, and it was really obvious, but you could just tell when you look back that they're inclined to ask those two questions, and then they haven't really got the time to manage whatever might come that way. Yeah, there's something about that 6-week appointment that needs to be reviewed, or even just not having the baby and the mum there. There needs to be something women to just, even on their own, so the partner can take the baby in the other room or something. It's not enough.
Yeah. I actually reached out to my friend who I'd had this conversation with before and said, like, can you help me find some support? She advised me to look into what the NHS offers first. So I self-referred. I got onto some group therapy. It was like group therapy for new mums. I did the course and thought, this isn't for me. I think I did a few, like 2 or 3 sessions, and I was like, no, this doesn't hit the spot in for what I'm like. I need to go and talk to someone about my individual like feelings and experiences.
Yeah.
So went back to that helpful friend again, and then she put me in touch with some private therapists who work within perinatal, and I started seeing a lovely therapist from about Teddy was about 3 months old, and I saw her up until he was about 6 months old.
Amazing.
Every week.
And I always think at these points, if you hadn't had a friend that worked in perinatal services, if you hadn't had the funds or found the funds to pay for that, which a lot of people wouldn't, there's got to be more, hasn't there? Not everyone knows someone that works within mental health. Like, it's got to be made more obvious. It's all these things that push me to start this, because again, it's just not known about. It's not talked about. It's not normalized. We're meant to be fine after birth, and a lot of people aren't.
Yeah, I do think actually, exactly. Like, if I didn't have the money to go to this private therapist, because it's not cheap, and where would I be now if I hadn't have seen her?
Yeah, it's quite a scary thought. When I did the prep for this episode, I wondered where we are at in the UK at the moment. And in the UK, actually 10 to 15% of new mums experience postnatal depression. That's 1 out of 10. So if you're in a postnatal unit and there's 10 beds, one of those mums will. And actually linking to the fathers as well, 10% of new fathers within the pregnancy period and the first year of their baby's life experience depression. That for me was really striking. And last year, 43,000 women received support from perinatal services. This year, we're at 57,000. So that's just NHS, that's not private. So that's a huge increase. This is not going away. And this is telling us that we need to normalise seeking help and the services that women can go to. And they shouldn't cost. It just feels like there's such a gap.
Yeah, and before I went down the private route, it felt like a bit of a battle to try and get to the therapy that I needed, because I kind of knew when I got offered group therapy, I kind of knew already that wasn't going to be for me, but I did it because I was advised that was the first thing that I should be doing, and then they'd look into further support after that.
Yeah. This is always a really difficult question to ask, and you don't have to answer it. A lot of women, when they experience postnatal depression, can get some dark thoughts, and they can have some suicidal thoughts about themselves or that attachment with the baby. Did you ever experience anything like that?
Yeah, so in that first 6 months, I'd say I would go to classes and see other women with their babies and like see the bond that they have. And I felt like I didn't have that with my little one. Like I had to work so hard at it, whereas it felt like everyone else around me just had it. They just clicked into it.
Yeah.
And because of everything we'd been through in those first few months, he also had silent reflux, so was uncomfortable and cried a lot. And he cried a lot in those first few months. And I would take him to
so
classes.
Traumatic.
He'd be the only baby crying throughout the class, and that didn't help either. So, yeah, I just thought like...
And the reality is, you felt like that on those days, but I bet you half the room also felt like that. And I bet you they'd had classes where they also had to leave because their baby was the only one crying. But again, it's that elephant in the room and comparison and not being able to share how we really honestly feel.
Yeah, definitely.
You wouldn't have been the only one in the room that was struggling with bonding or feeling like you got it together. I bet you.
Yeah, but you kind of just, because not a lot of people around me were talking about it, you do feel like you're the only one because, yeah, no one else is putting their hand up and saying, do you know what, I'm struggling to bond with my baby as well. It's almost like it's a bit shameful to admit it.
No, 100%. So did you ever have thoughts of, did it go to the point where you thought, I don't want to be here anymore? How bad did it get?
I've always been very good. If I feel those thoughts starting to arise, then that's when I like seek support. Yeah. So I try not to let it get to that point. But I definitely had thoughts of like, I shouldn't be a mum. Like, I'm not cut out for this. I can't deal with it mentally.
Yeah.
I'm no good at this. Someone else should have him.
Really? Yeah, that's a lot. And it sounds like you had that self-awareness and that insight. So in some illnesses postnatally, people sometimes lose that, and that's where the risk comes in. Yeah. But arguably with capacity and being aware, you know, hugely challenging to work through. And what helped you get through that patch? What helps you get through those thoughts that you just described?
It was the support of my friends and my network of mums around me. I was able to be very honest with I did NCT, so I had a good group of girls that we met, and I was able to say to them like, hey, I'm struggling here. And yeah, they were all so supportive. My partner as well was amazing throughout that whole time. And I actually think it might have, like, when I started to come out with it, I could see the effect that it had on him. I almost worried that he had a bit of postnatal depression because of everything that like I was feeling. So it was the support of my therapist, my friends, and I want to say my family, but actually I tried to keep it from them a bit because I didn't want them to think that I was struggling with this new experience of being a mum. Like, I don't know, it's different with family. I don't know if it's because it's generational, but I just didn't think that they'd get it as much. Okay. So yeah, I don't know. I had the support of my family, but I didn't confide in them like I would my friends and my partner.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Again, that's always something that I thought about when creating Postnatal Minds, is that due to some of those things that you described, generations, and having that open space where you don't need to worry about the impact of what you're saying can be so powerful. And like you said, yeah, it's not always that easy with family. And I bet you when they listen to this and when they watch this, they wish that you had, because, you know, when you have your baby, you're still their babies. I remember my mum saying to me, yeah, he's gorgeous, but you're my baby, and how are you? And that's shame that we put on ourselves, and the expectation of shame in relation to not feeling okay is something we also really need to challenge as well, isn't it?
Definitely.
And did you ever link back in with your GP? Like, was medication ever an off, or did you just stick to the talking therapy side of things?
I didn't bother with my GP after the initial, you seem fine to me. I thought, you know what, I've been through stages of my life before where I've dealt with like depression and anxiety, and I have been on medication in the past, but I actually thought for this I was dedicated to talking therapies in this circumstance. I really wanted to see what could come from doing that, instead of just going straight to medication or trying to do both.
And how did you know when that talking support was working?
I think at around 6 months postpartum. So yeah, Teddy was around 6 months old, and I started to notice our bond start to come through, and I'd have moments and I felt like, all right, no, like I'm your mum, and this is working for us now.
Yeah,
and
it's how it's meant to feel.
Yeah, and I've always loved him, but I felt, I don't know, the frustration had left me, and I felt like I was able to just enjoy the experience a bit more.
Yeah. So you were no longer in survival mode. You were more present and confident. And I guess that comes with time anyway, doesn't it? Because we know that hormone drop is the single most amount of hormones we'll ever have in our lives at one point. Yeah, and then if you add some mental health symptoms into that, I mean, no wonder it took you that long to get to that place. And then did going to groups and socialising felt different? Presumably you're crying less and sleeping better and things like that.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think once I'd started weaning Teddy as well, and like milk didn't become like, it wasn't the be all and end all.
Yeah.
People, you go to class and no one really cared how you're feeding your baby at that point. They're like, what foods is he trying? And I was just like, all right, that's cool. I can sort of step away from.
Yeah, it's like feeling more generic, isn't it? It's because milk and your feeding journey is so personal, but it's like a move towards the next stage of feeling a bit more generic with everyone, like getting to that. It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah. And and then around that stage is when we started to discover that he had a cow's milk protein allergy as well, so another challenge to get round, which we're still in that at the moment.
So tell us about that, because you've mentioned that very lightly, but I know that was a big part of your journey and the stress that you also experienced around that time. So how did you notice that?
So actually, if I think back to in the first month of Teddy, he had milk spots, but his were like quite aggressive. And again, midwives were like, don't worry about it, it's normal, like babies will get it. And then when we started to try out different foods and stuff, that's when we started to notice that there was potentially an allergy there. But also, whilst I was like pumping, I noticed that the more dairy I ate, the more I'd notice his reflux.
Okay.
So, yeah, I started to see a correlation there. And then I think when I was starting to slow down pumping a bit between like 6 months to a year, I'd gone to the doctors and said, I think I've worked out that he's got a cow's milk problem. And they just wanted to give him Gaviscon for the reflux. And I was like, no, like I've been cutting stuff out my diet and I think I've worked this one out.
You should have had that support. Like, again, you're having to self-diagnose and self-manage. Like, that blows my mind a bit as well. And having that confidence to challenge and say, no, sorry, there is a link here and I need.
Yeah. And then, it's still a challenge that we are dealing with to this day. So even this week, basically Teddy's had really bad eczema over the last month on his face. And I've been speaking to the hospital, I've been speaking to the dietitian, I've been speaking to the GP, again, conflicting advice, not sure what to do. So we are cutting cow's milk, soya and egg from his diet, which, is quite hard work actually, because I'm not great in the kitchen. So I have to get a little bit experimental and try and come up with something that he can actually eat, which has a full-time working mum who's got time for that.
Do you ever grieve and get cross and feel frustrated at the challenges that you're now again having to experience with that? Because you see people that have pregnancies and deliveries and postnatal periods and they just Zoom and they're fine, and then you have people that have difficulties within all of those phases all one. And then you've obviously got through all that really, really tough, hard work to get through those depressive symptoms. And now you've got all these physical challenges and the more, again, like the less straightforward weaning journey. And I mean, Arlo couldn't eat egg for a while, and that was hard enough because I realised how much egg was just in everything. So I cannot imagine the scale that you're now having to filtrate all your recipes and everything, and then trying to do separate meals for the family and working full time. Like, it's so tough. So yeah, do you ever feel a bit hard done by, I guess is what I'm alluding to?
I do. Yeah. And that's, it's a familiar feeling as well, actually, because in those first few months of Teddy, that was a feeling that was quite prominent. Like, why my baby? Why do I have to have the difficult birth, the difficult feeding journey, the silent reflux? Why can't it just be a bit smoother? But then I try and put things into perspective, and I'm like, those are a few challenges, Amber, but people have to go through worse. And actually, this is just part of becoming a parent. There will be challenges along the way.
I know. And what you said there really resonated with me, because there have been days with Arlo's journey that I've absolutely said, why us? But actually, when you're saying why us, you forget that there are other people in your shoes, and there are those that are totally worse off than you as well. And I always try and think, actually, what have I learned and what's it taught me about myself, and what has this whole thing taught us? And you can't control it. It's happening, and you have to just adjust and adapt to it. But it's okay to feel sad and frustrated and grieve what you haven't had as well, and what you don't have, and what they can't and don't have too. That's okay.
Yeah, for sure. And it's definitely, like you say, there are days when you feel that more than others, when you're feeling slightly less strong, and it's hard to put things into perspective, but I try to where I can, and that I find that helps me through the challenging phases.
I hope that those people that have to sail through know really how very lucky they are, because we didn't have reflux, we had colic, and it is really traumatic. It really ruined, you don't get evenings. You, again, just put it down to yourself. What we're doing wrong, and sometimes there is nothing that settles. And Arlo was a baby that cried all the time. And it's ever so challenging. And it's really hard to feel mentally well and positive when you've got that in the mix as well. And obviously now with Teddy, you've got the physical reaction to him having eczema, and you must feel so sorry for him. And it's approaching summer, and that will get dry and sore. And I really hope that you find that resolution, because it's not fair for them, is it?
No, I do feel for him. And yesterday I was getting all in my head about it and putting the blame onto myself. Like, it must be because I don't always get the time to feed him whole foods and cook from scratch. So maybe it's my fault. And then again, you have to really take yourself out of that, because that's not a positive place to be.
It's really easy to blame yourself. And it's also really amazing that you're able to identify that you're now doing that as well, because a lot of people wouldn't be able to. They would just internalize it and put it all on themselves, and then that would build and cause more depression or anxiety. Yeah, it's really powerful that you've got those skills, that you're able to recognize, actually, I need to remove myself out of this. Yeah.
Yeah, put that down to the therapy I had when I first became a mum.
Yeah.
Without that, I don't think I'd be able to remove myself from those thoughts as easy.
No. So I always try and wrap up these episodes with a nugget of wisdom from you. So what would you say to your former self, or maybe someone in your position now postnatally, or so maybe someone who's about to have a baby who might experience some of the things that you've talked about on this episode? What would you say to them or yourself then?
I would say to not put so much pressure on yourself and your baby in the beginning stages to get things right. But prior to that, it's good to have a birth idea of how you want things to go, but a plan might be a bit restrictive and then be detrimental to you. So take the pressure off yourself, respect the postpartum period. Don't let too many visitors into your house, because that can affect feeding journeys as well, and also your recovery. Just sit in bed and enjoy being in bed watching Netflix. Like, that's what that time is all about. You and your baby bonding.
Yeah, we get out of bed too quickly. I remember the second time round when I had Arlo and that first midwife visit after getting home from the C-section. Albert had gone off to nursery and I was in bed and he'd just fallen asleep and I was all comfy and had like my nice pajamas on, and the midwife arrived and I remember thinking, first time round I would have jumped up and gone and sat down on the sofa, but I said to Lloyd, please could you ask the midwife to come into the bedroom? And we had our appointment and I was in bed and he was asleep and I didn't need to move. And it's that second time confidence, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's okay to invite professionals to come to you. You don't have to please them or be, it's so true. And giving yourself permission is so important. Amber, thank you so much for sharing your story. All of these things we touched upon, allergies, the symptoms that you experience, that postnatal period. But I know so many people that are listening will resonate with a lot of what you said. And I hope that if someone's listening to this and they're experiencing some of the things that you've described, that it might be the nudge that they need to get some support, whether that's from their GP or their midwife or health visitor or me. But you're so brave for coming and talking about your experiences, because we need to rid of this shame that people feel. So thank you for getting in touch with me. And Teddy is so lucky to have you as his mum, and never forget that.
Thank you. Thanks
we don't
for
like
me.
hearing it, do we? But you are amazing. And it's also coming up to International Women's Day. So make sure you take time to celebrate how great you are. And I hope you've all really enjoyed listening to this episode. And if there's any feedback or comments that you'd love to send to Amber or myself, then please let us know and I'll make sure it gets back to Amber. But thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Amber. And I will see you all soon.
Bye.